Can you believe someone actually lives here? Imagine waking up and going about your life here every day. This is Arundel Castle. I've been here tons of times as a kid, but I never really thought about the fact that it's someone's home. Whose? This guy's. Edward Fitzalan Howard is a member of the British Nobility and holds the titles of Duke of Norfolk and Earl of Arundel. See, a lot of countries have abolished their nobilities, or stripped them of their land and privileges, so they don't really have dukes or earls anymore. But over here in the UK, we have plenty. And some of them live in places like this. And that got me thinking. It's a pretty weird system we have here, isn't it? Eldest sons inheriting titles, dukes living in castles in 2021. While it doesn't feel like it when you live here, we are, in the democratic world at least, an outlier in how we do things. The inner workings of the monarchy and nobility are a quirk of British culture that people here often don't think twice about. But it does come with some pretty bizarre rules. This is a sturgeon. These are some swans, and this is a whale. Do you know what these three things have in common? They all belong to the Queen. Well, sort of. By law, sturgeon is a royal fish, as are whales, despite not actually being fish. So technically, any sturgeon caught in UK waters, or any whale that beaches itself on British shores, belongs to the monarch. The Queen also owns all the swans on the River Thames, and has the legal right to claim ownership of any unmarked swan in the UK, if she chooses to. Okay, so the royals can assemble an army of wild animals. But it doesn't stop there. And there are some laws and privileges that royals and nobility receive that really do trouble people. That's led to a small but growing group to stand up and say, hey, maybe it's time for the royals to go. Enter Graham Smith.
Yeah. No, our constitution is completely ridiculous. That's one of the things laws.
He's the CEO of Republic, an organisation leading the charge to do something many have long thought impossible: abolish the monarchy. He's a Republican, not the kind that you'd find in US politics. Republicans here, and in other monarchies, aren't defined by whether they're on the left or right. Instead, they're pushing to replace the monarch with an elected head of state, a president, turning the United Kingdom into a republic.
The three biggest misconceptions, which are very common and which create an obstacle for us to overcome, which is that it's completely powerless and therefore harmless, that it unites the country, which is another way of saying everybody else likes it, so I'm not going to say anything, and that it's good for our economy. And none of those are true. In terms of the power, there's the power that they actually have to exercise, can exercise themselves, which is informal power, the power and the opportunity to influence behind closed doors, and to either push their own agenda, their political agenda, as Charles does all the time, or to protect their own interests, which they also do. Prince Charles and the Queen have something called Queen's and Prince's consent, which means that any law that goes through Parliament which affects their private interests, as the Dukes of Lancaster and Cornwall, needs their consent before it can complete its way into law. The two duchies are given enormous amounts of legal privilege and exemption. So that's kind of their power, but of course the Queen has enormous constitutional power, but can't use it. It's all sort of handed on a plate to the Prime Minister. And that is a problem because the Prime Minister shouldn't have that much power. In terms of domestic politics, the British Prime Minister is one of the most powerful in the democratic world. And we're seeing now there's new laws coming in which are exempting the government from prosecution, exempting the government from human rights protections and so on. And you can't do that in other countries because you have written constitutions, you don't have royal powers and so on.
We do not take an oath to a king or a queen. We take an oath to the Constitution.
It makes the power very centralised, but it also means we have a head of state who may as well not be there because he doesn't do anything. And there is nothing, if Parliament passes a law, there is nothing that anybody can do to strike that down. Parliament can't do something which is deemed to be unconstitutional because there is no written constitution that it can contradict.
On top of all that, there's some serious money in the royals' bank accounts. Duchies were once swathes of land ruled by a duke. There's 2 of them left in the UK now, although they're not anywhere as big as they used to be. The Duchy of Lancaster belongs to the Queen, and the Duchy of Cornwall to her son and heir, Prince Charles. Nowadays though, duchies act a lot like corporations, except they're not required to pay taxes. It's hard to find exact numbers on their earnings since, amazingly, the UK's Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply to the royal family. But in short, the royals are really, really rich, and have some big financial interests to protect. So the idea that queens and princes' consent means they can amend or veto laws that affect those interests is pretty wild.
Over the last 50 years, the income of the Duchy of Cornwall has gone up enormously, and effectively we, the taxpayer, are giving Charles £20 million a year. I calculated, if you take all the world leaders, all the sort of normal presidents, prime ministers, their combined incomes are in the region of 25 million. That's 180 people or something.
Yeah.
Between 25 million and Prince Charles gets 20 million on his own.
This was all news to me. I've never thought much about the monarchy one way or the other. When it's all you've known, you kind of assume it always has been and always will be there. And I know a lot of people, especially in my generation, who feel the same. But in the last few years, there has been a bit of a shift in attitudes towards the royals. I asked a couple of friends in London what they thought about it all.
I'm kind of quite indifferent. Let them do their thing, bring in some money.
Yeah, to be
Not
fair,
that
I haven't
bothered.
really thought about it until the last 2-3 months.
Because of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, I never really cared.
And what do you think now?
Do we need them?
Are they a
Question
bit
one.
antiquated for modern society?
Do you think that there's a place for royals in 2021?
That's the thing, maybe not.
I don't know, we've never had a life without them. I don't
That's
know if
true.
we need them. I don't know how much it would hurt.
Maybe we just think we need them because we've always had them.
So, with more people starting to question the place of the royal family in a modern Britain, how exactly do you go about getting rid of something as entrenched in British society as the monarchy?
Yeah, by democratic means, I mean, the focus has to be on getting the public opinion to shift. And then at some point, getting a referendum and winning it. The key thing here is that public attitudes are not what people think they are. So the headline figure, if you ask people, should we keep the monarchy or get rid of it? 75% will say keep it. But it's an opinion which is widespread, but not very strongly felt, if that makes sense. So support is high but shallow. Partly because, I mean, even speaking to you for 20 minutes or whatever, I'm telling you a load of stuff that you'd never heard about before. And this is the thing, is that most people have never really heard about it. Most people don't know the detail and don't engage with it, which is no fault of anybody. It's just that it's not an issue that is high up on people's agendas. And I think a lot of people think about the issue as being fairly trivial, unimportant. So when you start to talk about what it's really like and how bad it is, then they start to go, yeah, fair enough. There needs to be a very strong, clear message that, you know, there is no such thing as royalty. It's just a made-up thing, and you were just ordinary people, and the property you had was our property, and now it really is our property, and you can go off and, you know, do your own thing and live your own life. Because what it says as a country is that we are backward-looking. We don't have the confidence to govern ourselves entirely, that we still want to tug the forelock and all the rest of it. When the reality is that we are a very modern, outward-looking, innovative country with a very sophisticated economy and all the rest of it, and that doesn't get rejected because this weird chocolate box fantasy gets in the way. Other countries are fine without it, you know.
What do you say to people who would call you unpatriotic for not being supportive of the royal family?
I'd say that patriotism is a love of and concern for your country, which means the people in it, not the institutions. And if you care about your country and you look at the monarchy and you think, well, this is an institution which is pretty awful, which doesn't serve the people, which, it's spending all these millions of pounds that could be spent on schools, hospitals, and so on. I said that the patriotic thing is to get rid of the monarchy. I think the idea that patriotism is a love of your monarch is an idea that, I don't think people take that seriously and haven't done for 300 years. Imagine the process of having that huge public debate and then a referendum where we end up voting the majority for the Republic, and then an election for our head of state and a new constitution that we've all had a kind of a say in. We're going to own that and feel ownership of it, and we're going to be more proud of it, and that's going to make people feel better about their country rather than sort of people that you feel excluded from the Westminster elite. And this is the difference between a monarchy and a republic, is that in a monarchy you are spectators, and in a republic, in a democracy, you should be participants. And, once we win it, that's it. There wouldn't be another one to bring it back, because no monarchy has ever been brought back democratically.
I hadn't quite grasped how many of Britain's archaic laws have stuck around until today. Some concentrate power in the hands of a few people. The Privy Council enables politicians to meet with the monarch and make decisions and laws without any scrutiny from Parliament or the public, locking voters out of what should be a democratic process. And other laws just seem a little backwards. If the heir to the throne marries a Catholic, for example, they're automatically removed from the line of succession. What does that say to the rest of the world? So it's more than just people with quirky titles living in palaces and castles. To be honest, whether you support it or not, it's hard to see our current system sticking around forever. More and more people, particularly in the younger generations, are asking, in a democratic country, where we're all supposedly equal in law, is this who we want to be in 2021? But there is a big portion of the population who feel a strong attachment to the royal family, and see it as an integral part of British identity and culture, and more on that in another video. So whether the British public is ready to let go of the royals just yet is another question entirely.
Your Majesty, today you become the longest reigning monarch in British history.
Ladies and gentlemen, on this very special day, 3 cheers for Her Majesty the Queen. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!
History is on our side, and there will come a point when there is a majority in favour of getting rid of the monarchy. It's not a radical position. Most of Europe has Republican governments. So the argument for a republic is slightly more than simply, the royals are awful, let's get rid of them.
Yeah, I figured that might be the case.
But the royals are awful and we should get rid of them.